The rival in the past, even though they had exchanged blades many times, the man disappeared before their rivalry was settled. The mightiest rival, White Swordsman, after all, is a human and cannot escape from senescence. Perhaps he's already passed away, but the raging dragon's soul could tell that the two rivals would eventually meet again for sure. So, the Legends lore drops down a huge thing, basically just telling you that Blaster Blade's gonna come back. Which, we all knew that Blaster Blade was eventually going to come back. But Draconic Overlord confirms it, says it right here,
right there,
that he is going to meet the White Swordsman again. The White Swordsman has a link to it. If you click on it, guess where it goes? Blaster Blade. So, you know that his rival, Blaster Blade, will be getting something going on. Aichi Sendo Legend Deck confirmed.
I fucking called that shit.
Oh, sorry about that, but yeah, I called it, and everybody knows it. So there you go. All right, so I'm sure you've actually, read the title of the video, and you know that we are doing a Blaster Blade lore podcast. So we're just gonna go ahead and get into it, of course, because decided to do this because the Legend deck was coming out, and thought, of course, well, now it's time to get a Blaster Blade lore going on. The only reason I've left it so long is because of that anyway. This is probably going to be a longer video. I'm going to try to skip around a little bit, not read all the lores to you, because, to be honest, some of them are very long, and I don't feel like reading that much. So, let's start with original Blaster Blade, of course. So he's got, like, 3 lores. The small one says he's an elite knight from the standing army of royal paladins of the United Sanctuary's holy nation. Close friend and confidant to the King of Knights, Alfred, and he gets his powers by using the sword Blaster Blade, which he shares its name. So, Blaster Blade's the name of the sword, not the name of him, although he calls himself Blaster Blade, even though that's the name of the sword. So the sword turns courage into power, so that's the whole point there. And then I'm just going to keep that where that is. You're just going to need the first lore for that. We're going to actually go to Blaster Dark next, because his lore is very important to the continuing lore of Blaster Blade. We only need the first Blaster Dark's lore to be able to really get into it. But so, next one is Blaster Dark. Blaster Dark's lore is unable to demonstrate the courage demanded by the sword-like weapon Blaster Blade. He walked a road to hell, empowered by his amplified negative emotions. His hatred is aimed at the person called Blaster Blade, who could use the weapon he was unable to activate, causing him to take up the mantle of Blaster Dark, and under the guide of the Dragon of Hell, Phantom Blaster Dragon, he plans to end things with his fated rifle. So Blaster Dark is the first Blaster Blade. If you've seen that Blaster Blade, that's the promo where he's turned away from the sword and he's not using it, that's because, and he doesn't have a skill, that's Blaster Dark, because Blaster Dark was the first Blaster Blade, and he couldn't use the sword, so he was rejected, and he cast himself out, and went to go find power himself. And, he found the Darkness Sword, which is, like the Blaster Dark Sword, so there you go. His Blaster Dark's second lore is important. He once had an obsession with strong hatred towards Blaster Blade, but they reconciled through a duel during the war. In order to stop the Dragon of Hell, who had revealed its true nature and thrown the entire Cray into chaos, he temporarily entrusted his sword, which can be said his life, to Blaster Blade. As a result, his move had become the decisive factor in awakening of the Vanguard. That is a link. It hot links to MLB. So that's our next step on the lore. So after the war, he tried to rebuild Shadow Paladin. He became the new leader of Shadow Paladin and made it a force for justice from the darkness and such. Because he was part of the power to awaken the ultimate Vanguard, also leaks to Majesty Lord Blaster, he's feared by the mysterious force, which is the Void, Link Joker, stuff like that. And he was also sealed away like Blaster Blade was. So, explanation as to why Blaster Dark and Blaster Blade disappeared during the Link Joker arc. because the Void doesn't like them. They were able to make MLB, and MLB is a threat. I would read Master. I am gonna read Majesty Lord Blaster's lore. Majesty Lord Blaster is Blaster Blade. This is the form of the hero of the United Sanctuary, Blaster Blade, when he takes control of the twin swords, the Sword of Light, which represents power and courage, and the Sword of Shadows, which represents resolve and determination. Hence the flavor text on Blaster Blade being courage is the sword of is the sword of hope, or is it the sword of light? Sword of light, shine forth Blaster Blade. He's activating the Blaster Blade sword. Blaster Dark's lore is determination is the sword of darkness. Thunder forth Blaster Dark. He's activating the light sword, which might be named Blaster Dark. You know, we never get that said spelled out for us, but Blaster Blade is only the name of the sword. So there we go. So Majesty Lord Blaster takes control of the both swords, and when he was given the Sword of Resolve from its owner, King of Shadow, the Knight of Shadows, so when Blaster Dark gave him the Sword of Resolve, he was able to, become Majesty Lord Blaster. And then he goes and, he, beats Phantom Blaster Dragon, who was the Dragon of Hell, trying to take over Cray and all that. And so yeah, that's nice. Just all of that sort of stuff. After Majesty Lord Blaster, we go to Blaster Blade Liberator, who is Knight of Gold Paladin, regular army of the United Sanctuary, second regular army of the United Sanctuary, and the hero who once awakened as the legendary Vanguard. In response to the wish of King of Knights, he joins the recently formed Gold Paladins as the strongest warrior of the order, and is appointed to bear the title of Liberator. Being the confidant of the King of Knights and the mentor of young warriors, he lives a busy life. Yet there is no way that he would neglect his own training. He has perceived something out of joints on Cray, possibly due to his acute senses. After that, when he escorted the King of Knights to visit Genesis, he saw the foreseen image of the future. It was the sight of deformed Cray, which everything fell in despair, Chaosbreaker Dragon, to expel the looming threat, to change despair of the future to the hope. The hero of light holds the blade of hope once again. So, he holds the Blaster Blade sword once again. Infinite Rebirth lore basically says the same thing. They're going to go find hope and dispel despair because Chaosbreaker Dragon's trying to, destroy everything like, Link Joker stuff does, Starvaders and whatnot. After Blaster Blade Liberator, you can go to Blaster Blade Spirit. Blaster Blade Spirit is just this spirit body of Blaster Blade, which was exposed by refining his only will and power. This is the form that manifested from his heart and his wish to give even a little help to warriors of the new generation that fought for him, who was sealed. So he comes up to help the people who are trying to save him. He's a Blaster Joker, and yeah, that's cool and all that. We can look at Blaster Joker's lore and see that the reverse Blaster Blade, with any cognizance of his original emotions removed, within Link Joker, he is categorized as a berserk emotion type reversed being. The pain he feels at being unable to understand his own memories is directly linked to his destructive impulse, creating an even greater power. As the first provisional success of the experiment, it is handled with the utmost of caution, and must be in some form of contact with its guardian Photon at all times, a pitiful, mad hero whose mind has been infested. This hollow trump card calls despair to return to the world once more. So, Blaster Blade got reversed as he was trying to save the world from Chaosbreaker Dragon. And then they went to go save him, and yeah, he became Blaster Joker, and then he tried to help the people trying to save him as Blaster Blade Spirit. Blaster Blade Seeker is kind of doing the same thing as Blaster Blade Liberator. Blaster Blade Liberator turned into Blaster Blade Seeker as they went out to try to help save the world from Chaosbreaker, and then he was reversed. So that's how that went. After all of those, we really run out of Blaster Blades to look over the lore for. So after Blaster Blade was liberated, he kind of just fell off for a second. I mean, we can look at different units like Blaster Blade Burst, who doesn't have a lore, and Blaster Blade, you know, or Exculpate the Blaster, new style blaster. But what we really need to go look at is, of course, the new Blaster Blade Exceed, which does have a lore. So Blaster Blade Exceed's lore is pretty great. Um, after he was liberated, Blaster Blade presumably died, right? Like we saw in Dragonic Overlord, the Legends lore. However, he didn't. He got to something interesting happened there. So we'll get to that in a second. I thought there was a lore that had Blaster Blade fighting Dragonic Overlord, but I don't know where it went or if it was in Exceed's lore, but it shouldn't have been in Exceed's lore. Maybe it is, who knows. So Blaster Blade Exceed does have a lore. He is the hero of the Holy Nation and bears numberless honorable titles, including but not limited to the Swordsman of Light, the strongest knight of the Sanctuary, the confidant of the King of Knights. He is the only knight who can use the experimental armament EXD Blaster, which boosts the blaster armament, which is the Blaster Blade Sword, to its apex. With this armament, his power surpasses the level of man and have left legends that one could hardly believe are achieved by a single man, such as suppressing the frenzied guardian dragon of another nation. Oh, there it is. He fought Dragonic Overlord several times, repelling the Empire's massive army single-handedly, fighting all of Kagero by himself. As Alfred switched his focus from military commandment of knightly orders to internal affairs, he was bestowed the title of Supreme Grandmaster, leading all knightly orders of the Holy Nation. In times of him being the Supreme Grandmaster, the number of factions hostile to the sanctuary dropped impressively, and it was said that all the world looked at him in awe. By the way, there was no record about his death, so tales about him came out one after another, like the reincarnation into a guardian dragon to protect the sanctuary, and the apotheosis into an immortal knight to save the world. So the blaster armament is basically the blaster blade sword can make you insane, and the blaster armaments, the new ones are trying to get rid of that. However, Blaster Blade Exceed uses one that would make him more insane if he wasn't just so high willpower. And so Blaster Blade Exceed is super great because he can use the Blaster Blade sword and the armor that he's using without going crazy. So Blaster Blade's not dead. He just became even more powerful, and nobody really knows why, but hey. I'm sure you might be interested in the Alfred Stride's new lore, so because that already exists, I feel like, might as well throw it in just as a little bit of a fun thing. This is the form of the King of Knights Alfred after the Invasion Great Wars. He was bestowed the Holy Sword, Holy Saver, by Guardian Dragon, Arc Saver Dragon. That's the unit that can Counterblast 3, Soul Blast 3, and then call a unit from Damage Zone, Drop Zone, and Deck at the same time. So that's pretty cool. He is like a super awesome, powerful unit, and gave Alfred a cool sword that he used to suppress the Great War's aftershocks, which were riots and turmoil. So Alfred went down, cut down everybody who was still causing chaos. Blaster Blade killed everyone who tried to assassinate Alfred, and then they create lands where no sins exist and smiles are forever. And in the lands that they clear, there's no crime for decades. And then after they clear the land and make peace on Cray and all that, he entrusts his commanding power to the knight. So Blaster Blade becomes basically the king, while Alfred is still doing politics. So Blaster Blade commands the military. Alfred is, internal affairs. So that's the Blaster Blade lores in a nutshell. We only did the Blaster Blade lores because if I did all the Blaster Dark Lords, we would be here for a long, long time. However, maybe when Blaster Dark gets some more support, even though it doesn't really need it right now, we'll see some Blaster Dark lores going on. It's too bad I didn't start this channel before the first Legend deck, because I definitely would have done Blaster Dark lures, but who knows, maybe it'll still happen. So, yeah, I think Blaster Blade is really cool. I'm building the deck, planning on playing it at ARG, um, all that stuff. Planning on playing it a lot. It's pretty fun so far. Fun to play, not fun to play against. I hear my friends call me, what's that, bandwagon meta crazy, selling my soul to Bushy Road, all that. But I just like to build new things and have fun, so. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I think the lore of Blaster Blade's pretty cool, and I'm sorry if I rushed through it a little bit. I just didn't want to give you another Overlord 30-minute one, like how that went. So, thanks for watching. We really appreciate it. Bye.